growth in emissions, that's pretty standard. Actually, your emissions haven't grown quite as aggressively as other communities I've worked with. And if you'll notice in 2009, there was a dip down. I bet you all can guess what that is from. And that's not necessarily the way we want to cut emissions. We don't want it to be from an economic slowdown, so that's not really what we're proposing here. But that sort of does explain that 2009 dip, and I'll go into a little more detail with that in a second. But the basic sectors that we broke it up into, just to have a deeper level of analysis, is we have commercial, industrial. Industrial and municipal really could fit into the same category as industrial, but it's nice to kind of have that broken out with the municipal there too. And then residential and then transportation sector. If you want to go to the next one there. And these are, this is just kind of a quick snapshot. If you take 2007, which is the starting year of the inventory, this is kind of the breakup if you were to look at what the contributors are to your overall emissions. As you can see, electricity's, that's really the big one. And that's pretty common. Usually transportation makes up a little bit more of a community's emissions, but I think I've never worked with a small community like Independence before, and so that might account for that. But as we keep building more years in the inventory, we can really start to figure out and dig deeper into that data and analyze it. Let's see, yeah. Really, if you look, things stayed pretty consistent in terms of where the sources of emissions were. But in 2011, you saw like a little bit of an increase in the electricity and a little bit of a decrease from gasoline vehicle miles traveled. Nothing really major, but it is kind of something to see there. And if we can hop to the next one. So this again was just kind of that first slide with the aggregate data, so you can kind of see the dip down in 2009. But overall, emissions have been pretty, have kind of flatlined for you, which is really good. That gives you a lot to work with, and they're not changing much. To give you a little bit of perspective on that, if we go to the next slide, and what really caused the dip, even in 2009, this is just kind of interesting to note, because sometimes you can layer this data with other, data like GDP and whatnot. And you can see that in 2009, when pretty much the whole United States fell in kind of economically hard times, people were really slow to react in terms of natural gas. It looks like vehicle miles traveled didn't change much, and gasoline didn't change much, or trips at the airport. But what we see a big response in was the electricity. And I think that's something to know outside of, a lot of times this information gives you more than just what our greenhouse gas emissions were. It kind of says that where the response in the community is when times get hard is in electricity. And that's something to note. I know Independence has one of the higher rates for electricity in the state of Iowa. And so maybe that's something to note, and maybe that's somewhere we could sort of point our efforts in the future to perhaps increase energy efficiency or reduce costs somehow for customers in the community, and then at the same time tackle the greenhouse gas issue. This is one that I kind of fit in there because it's near and dear to my heart. One of the reasons that I do this throughout the state is to try and encourage communities to adopt a 50% by 2030 target. That was a target that we were able to adopt in Dubuque. We're also working with Decorah towards the same type of goal. I will tell you, Independence is next to Dubuque, the closest to being able to approach this subject. And I just kind of wanted to show you like a neat little graphic, not that things would play out this way, but this is kind of put into perspective that your current emissions are really just like a little short window in the big time scale of things, and that there's a lot of opportunity out there. So this is probably like one of the most important points, and we've made this over and over with the Dubuque community as we tried to build trust, especially in the business community, is that what does it really mean was a question we got. Like, what does it mean to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030? And that was a question I was happy to answer. My background actually is in economics, so I've always felt, I've always had a strong belief that I feel has been proven by German models and some of the examples that Wendy gave earlier, that cutting your greenhouse gas emissions really, when you take control of it as a community, and when it's not like a federal level, like there's a lot of options on a federal level, like cap and trade, tax and dividend. There's regulations that are going on right now, even of big polluters. But when you bring it down to a community level, the tools in your toolbox really are quite different, and you can really shape those towards putting yourself at an economic competitive advantage to other communities in Iowa or other communities in the country. And so, what I think some of the big advantages and what it means really is it's an opportunity for clean air. It's an opportunity for improving your green space and the livability of your city. it's in terms of economic resilience. I mean, energy efficiency. I personally work in the solar renewable energy industry, and it's one of the biggest job creators out there. 13% of the net job growth in the last year was actually from solar PV jobs, and so we do know, we've seen in Iowa how wind as an industry has been such a big job creator for Iowa and a staple of our economy. And then it can also mean community savings. So besides the job creation, we talked a little bit about how responsive the community was to electricity prices and when they came on economic hard times. And so saving the community money is always, it increases a multiplier. So the multiplier for energy efficiency is something like 7 to 1. That's according to the Office of Energy Independence in Iowa here. And so for every dollar you can save in your community through energy efficiency, you get $7 circulating in your community. So that's a big economic multiplier. And then of course it increases property value through things like if you can increase the accessibility, make your streets more walkable, bikeable, all those things add to property value, and there's great case studies throughout the country to support that. The part that I like, possibly the best, is the social cultural vibrancy aspect. So when you're offering options to people for accessibility, you start to engage more of the community. You have a healthier community, and that's just a handful, off the top of my head, of the great benefits of doing this. So, I think I'll take questions at the end, but I'll let Wendy take it over here again. Thank you.
I would like to give you an example of what small-town Iowa is capable of. In the 1970s, the manager of the Osage Municipal Utility was faced with the prospect of having to build a new coal plant to meet energy needs. He ran the numbers and realized it would be cheaper to implement more energy efficiency programs than to build a coal plant. His programs reduced electric bills to half of the state average and unemployment to half of the national average because lower electricity rates attracted new factories. Well, Osage's new factories increased energy demand, so once